I'm an English language teacher and I teach overseas students, and I love fly fishing in my free time. I was lucky enough to be taken into the bush by my father. He took our whole family when we were really young, and we got to learn bushcraft and learn to fish for trout. And I just never looked back. I just kept going. I went into saltwater fishing for a while and then straight back to fly fishing, and I've been going around the rivers and doing it ever since. I absolutely love two-handed fishing and swinging flies. That's my passion at the moment. Basically, it's fishing a streamer pattern down and across the river rather than nymphing upstream or dry fly fishing upstream. You're fishing down below yourself and you're swinging the flies across the current looking for a big pull. Basically, we have a running line, which is very thin, with a shooting head. So a skagit head is just a fly line that's been condensed into one very thick piece, and it lets us put a really heavy sink tip on for the winter or a float tip for the summer, and you can spey cast really well with them. I love that you can cover so much water. So you're stepping down, you're fishing it down and across, and you're segmenting the river into sort of 1 meter pieces, so you get to cover a lot of water as you fish. And I just love the take. When you're swinging across and they hit on the swing and the line goes straight and boom, it's all on, the reel's screaming. It just, that tight line connection, that just gets me every time. There's a lot of advantages. Basically, you need a lot less back cast room for the average caster. You can cast in very tight quarters. Spey casting is quite an effortless type of casting, so it's very relaxing. Another advantage really is that they can turn over a heavy sink tip and they can turn over a big fly. You can fish lead eyes, tungsten beads, really get those flies down. I think it's going from this point of setting a line up, it's swinging across, and then there's just this sudden connection. It goes from nothing water tension into just bang. And they just seem to hit, because you can fish very big flies on a skagit line, you get very big takes on a bigger fly. So I think there's something exciting about that. You can use any gear. You can use a single-handed rod, you can use a double-handed rod. All you really need to do is get a line set up with a running line, a skagit head such as an OPST head, and a sink tip, and you're away to go. You've got length of fluorocarbon or mono and a fly on the end. They're basically a very short shooting head made to put a sink tip on the end. Of course, mass turns over mass. They were made to cast bigger flies and heavy sink tips to really get down to hydronomous fish that are coming up from the sea or from the lakes. And so those fish in the winter, they're feeding very deep, obviously, and sometimes they're not even feeding, so you need to get it right in front of them if you want a chance of getting them. You can use any rod at all. I've even heard of people using check nymphing rods to cast them. Basically, the OPST system came out to be really versatile. They're short heads, they'll fit a single-handed rod very well, and then they're perfect for a two-handed rod as well. So whatever rod you've got, you can get set up, you can get on the river, and you can get fishing and have fun. As long as you've got the right weight for the type of rod you have. Every rod has a grain window, and it's finding the right place in that grain window for your rod. OPST have a line chart, and they break it down for single hand, they break it down for double-handed rods, and typically faster rods will be up a little bit higher, and slower to medium flex rods will be down a little bit lower. Basically, you just match it up and get a suitable sink tip, a suitable head, and away you go. I like trying to fish most water. There is some water that's more difficult than others, and I enjoy to have a play. I think that the easiest, most conducive water to swinging flies is typically fairly wide runs with an even current, an even bottom, but with different contours on the bottom, so you've got grooves and buckets and areas where the fish will sit, but a uniform current gives you a nice swing. I think the harder water are the places where you've got a heavy head of a run into a pool with a very large back eddy. That's one of the challenges. I'm trying to fish, but it's very hard to get fish out of those areas. I mainly fish two main styles. I fish shank flies and I fish tube flies. Now on the shanks, I often fish intruders and I fish rabbit leech sort of patterns. But basically the shank flies have a stinger hook at the back, which is tied on either wire or braid, especially because like here on the Tongariro, often fish will short strike, so they'll attack the back of the fly. So that having that trailer hook is perfect. I absolutely love tube flies. So you're tying on plastic or tungsten pieces of tube, and you're making the fly on the tube, and the line just goes through and you attach that trailer hook at the back. Very versatile. So it depends what time of year you're fishing and where you want to be in the water column. For winter fishing like now, I generally spend most of my time with quite a heavy tip, tungsten coated. An OPST 10 or 12 foot bucket tip usually does the job, and they would sink it somewhere around 8 or 9 inches per second. And leader I'm still playing with. That's one of my main things. I'm trying to play with lightly weighted flies and shorter leaders. I tend to do well with. And then often I'll fish a longer leader, getting up to around 4 to 6 foot with a weighted fly, and sometimes even a little bit longer. But on the unweighted flies, I'll go down to as low as 2 foot sometimes. Yeah, well basically you're letting the sink tip get the fly down with an unweighted fly. So the sink tip's getting down and the unweighted fly is floating a little bit higher than the sink tip. So that drags it off the bottom. With the longer leader and the weighted fly, I've found for times when you almost want them getting down quickly and bouncing together, I've found that to be quite effective. I love getting into a long run and you're looking down and you've got all this water to cover and just trying to think where the fish are sitting, where I want to place my fly, what speed I want it to be swinging through. And then, of course, spey casting, banging out beautiful casts when they come out beautiful. It's just great fun. And then you're living with that anticipation. You know something's coming, you don't know when it's gonna hit, and you swing, 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 and then bang. You can have a morning where you might not even have a touch for an hour, and then suddenly pulls start coming and it's electric. Yeah, it got me. I think primarily being set up with the right weight lines for your rod. It can be a lot more challenging if your rod is heavily overloaded or underloaded. But if you get it right and you get that grain window right, life becomes a lot easier and a lot more fun for you to learn. I think just getting out on the river, swinging flies, having fun, looking where the trout are and working it out. There's a lot of magic to be had by just playing around, playing with your leaders, playing with your flies, and just finding out what works. But getting a line in the water and just having fun. I think, like any type of fishing, look at the area you're fishing. Look what contours there are. Look where the grooves are in the bottom, where the boulders are sitting, and try to play around with your fly's motion. Try and get it swinging fast in front of boulders, swinging slowly in front of them. Play around, because the fish sit in predictable places. So it's not worth just chucking blindly, mending and leaving it. Trying to work out what gets you to the depth that you want to be at, and just being aware of what you're fishing. If you do that, it's a lot more fun, and you get to see these little points that tend to repeat where fish just seem to be, and you know they're going to be there. Whether they take on that day, that's another thing, but you know the fish are sitting there. And so if you can get your fly in front of them, sitting in front of their faces, you have a very high chance of being eaten.